Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. This week, we are doing part 2 of our Reagan series. We're talking about his handling of the AIDS crisis in this particular episode.
It's going to be a laugh riot, everybody. Hold on to your bellies. It's going to be so funny.
Gird your loins means something different here. But just to get started,
yes,
we are always looking for suggestions for creeps and for non-creeps. Good place to start with us is Facebook. Now, we have a basic Facebook page. You can like it. Episodes are posted there, but usually that's a place where people go to complain about our language. This is your warning that we use salty language in this program.
Fuck yeah.
We're much more interactive in our Facebook group. You have to answer some questions. Mostly just promise not to be an asshole, and then you can come and hang out with us. So just type in What a Creep podcast group in Facebook and answer the questions, and you come on in. Just do your best and come on in and join us.
And it's the best. It's the best.
Fun
It's the
place.
Only reason I go on Facebook is to go to this group and people share like things that are in the news. We talk about movies. But it's very fun.
It is. We are on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at What a Creep Podcast. And then we also have an old-timey email. It's whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. Once again, your ideas for creeps and non-creeps. We end every episode with somebody who's not a creep. That just helps alleviate all the creepiness into something a little bit more wonderful. We hope.
I hope.
We also have stickers. If you would like some stickers, and I've had a few people email me this week. Hello. I dropped them in the mail for you, but if you're interested in stickers, give us your address wherever you are on the planet of Earth. We will get you some stickers because that's what we care about.
That's what we care. We love stickers.
I do love stickers. I think they're great. Yeah. So, Sonia, do you want to tell them about the website?
Yeah. Y'all go to whatacreeppodcast.com. It's everything you want to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. We have links to all of our past episodes in there, and you can click on those little links, and it opens up, and you'll see our show notes because we source everything we do. We're not making this stuff up. We want to give people credit for the work they do. If you're looking for a deeper dive, fabulous place to start. We also have a link to our merch shop where we have the amazing shirt of, the high road can get fucked, and, now it's like seems super appropriate.
Yeah.
With everything that's going on in the world.
I should get that shirt. I'm writing that down.
I have it. And I will say, like, Threadless has really, like, their shirts are really soft and comfy. Like, I wear mine to bed all the time. I should start getting a little braver and wear it in public, but I wear it to bed all the time. It's one of my go-to shirts. So do that. We also have a link to our Patreon. You want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, Patreon. We have our first 8 seasons on the Patreon wall. Plus, we put out 2 bonus episodes a month. And those bonus episodes are super extra fun because Sonia and I do them video-wise. So you could see what we look like and see us. And we just, we talk about what's happening in the news. We shoot the shit. Just different creepiness in the news and fun things in the news and all that kind of thing. Updates on past episodes, all that fun stuff. And you can absolutely listen to it on audio only. But
yes,
if you're interested, we just thought it would be kind of like a fun extra thing.
Yeah, some people like to watch their podcasts.
Yeah.
And it's a thing. And we hadn't really done that before. And now we're doing it and people seem to really like that. So awesome. I'm glad you like seeing us.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Christina, Jack, Lauren, Murney, and Wit. All of them joined the Patreon page. We really, really appreciate it. We just use it for the costs of the show and for the costs of subscribing to all these sources. Yes.
Yeah. We love to pay people for their work. So
right.
We like to support journalism. That's what we mainly use it for.
Right. All right, Sonia. I think another way you could support the show You go to
yep.
Spotify, Good Pods, wherever you leave us. You make sure you subscribe. But if you can leave us a positive review, that'd be amazing. And especially in Apple Podcasts, if you can leave us a 5-star review, that really helps us. I want to say thank you to Nick HHH11 for her 5-star, their 5-star review. And I think we mentioned this last week, but JKM_RN.
Yes.
Thank you. It really helps us and we appreciate it. And we love doing this show and this is really fun for us. So thank you all for being with us. Like for the last 4 or 5 years we've been doing this. I can't believe it.
I know. You know, it's funny that you say like it's fun putting it together because it really is.
It really is.
And I spent all week like just living and breathing like all things Ronald Reagan. And I'm like, gross. And like, but at the same time, like I like putting it together. So the show, it is really fun and it's therapeutic to talk about these creeps and fucking weirdos out there and get it out of our system and all collectively agree that this person's gross.
Yeah.
So, and I loved picking up what you were putting down last week with your Reagan episode. And I was like, seriously, this could be like 5 parts. Like,
yeah, this is your first time listening and your first, the episode previous to this, I talked about Ronald Reagan and we also mixed in a little John F. Kennedy in there because we were talking about mental health and Reagan's awesome, that's me being sarcastic, take on mental health care.
Yeah.
Sonia, we're continuing today with the AIDS crisis, which happened.
Yes.
Reagan was in office from 81 to 89. He was there for 2 terms, and then he developed Alzheimer's soon after being in office. It was a few years later. But where are you starting with us today, Sonia?
Yeah, well, let's start with our sources, y'all. So sources for this episode: The Atlantic, BuzzFeed, History, HIV.gov, The New Yorker, PBS, The Reagans. It's a documentary on Showtime. The short film that is directed by Scott Kalanick, I think maybe. I'm sorry, everybody. It's called When AIDS Was Funny. I posted a clip of it in our group. It'll make you real mad. Vice, Vox, Washington Post, and Wikipedia. Always Wikipedia, the unofficial sponsor of the show.
Sorry, can I mention also that on Patreon, you can sign up for free. And then we put clips there for like news clips. We put there like that help illustrate the show that we normally will post in our Facebook group and we post it on TikTok. I also post it there and do it for free. So, because not everybody's on TikTok or Facebook. Some people don't like social media. That's why we do that.
We hear you.
I Sonia.
Sometimes wish I was that person.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
I'm jealous.
So when HIV/AIDS, the epidemic started in the early 80s, the Reagan administration response was, to put it lightly, lacking. Most of their response for the first couple of years involved like making jokes at a daily press briefing. They really didn't take it seriously for a long time. It mainly infected it was involving gay people, and they just didn't care. So by the end of 1984, that's Reagan's first term, AIDS had affected almost 8,000 people and killing almost 4,000 people. Scientists had identified AIDS and HIV, and the U.S. Centers for like Disease Control and Prevention had all identified like all the ways that it could be spread. And even then, Reagan and his administration didn't do shit about it. It wasn't until September 1985, 4 years after it started, that he first like publicly mentions AIDS in a press conference. But by then, AIDS was already a full-blown epidemic. They're estimating that about 450,000 Americans died of the disease between 1981 and 2000. We go all the way up to 2000 because it's a toll. That number, they believe that, at least in part, it's blamed on Reagan's neglect of this outbreak. So, Reagan, what a creep.
Dutch. That was his nickname.
Let's talk about him. So, we're not going to get too much into his history because Margot did a fabulous job in last week's episode. But, he was a successful actor, in the 40s and 50s, got into politics at 66, and he ran for governor in California. And he won it, two terms, I guess. And he served from 67 to 75. So in 67, he's in his first term as governor. And two of his close advisors, Richard Quinn and Phil Batliaga, I think it was his chief of staff, they were outed as gay in the media. Some local columnists just outed them. And, Reagan was always like campaigning on this, like, I'm going to end moral decline in America and all these things. So instead of like standing up for his employees, he chose to fire them.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
For being gay. So just to be clear, like, he was always shitty.
This is when he was governor?
That was when he was governor. So in between like his presidential run and his governorship being over, this is the only good thing I'm going to say about Reagan. He did come out against the Briggs Initiative, which was a thing in the late 70s where they were trying to ban gay men and lesbians from teaching in California public schools. We did an episode on this.
Anita
and
Bryant.
He came out against it. So yeah, it's like the only good thing he did. The rest of the time, he's a fucking creep. So he wins the presidential election in 1980. He did this with the backing of the evangelical vote and the, quote unquote, moral majority led by Jerry Falwell. He's on our list, y'all. Mm-hmm. I promised to cover this one a while ago. Him and his shitty son. Don't you worry. I'm going to get to it. He sucks so hard. Like, it's so hard. Anyway, the backing of that moral majority and that vote played a really big part in Reagan's lack of response on the AIDS epidemic. So, and I did read a few like pro-Reagan arguments where they're like, he wasn't homophobic because they had gay friends. Like, and
black
it's like
friends and blah, blah,
yes,
blah.
exactly.
Jewish
and
friends.
Like,
okay.
That whatever, like, this gets a big shoulder shrug for me. Like, I'm not homophobic. I have gay friends. Well, you're in a person of power. And what did you do to like give them equal rights? Oh, nothing.
You were taking away equal rights from them.
Yes. Yeah. So goodbye. The truth is Reagan believed that being gay was a sin. And in the spring of 1987, he actually discussed the AIDS epidemic with his biographer, Edmund Morris. And he said, maybe the Lord brought this down. Maybe the Lord brought down this plague because illicit sex is against the 10 Commandments.
By the way, Reagan was banging everybody he could.
Right?
Yeah. We talked about it in my episode.
Yep. In other interviews, he often said things like, being gay was an illness, that maybe it should be illegal, and that gay people shouldn't work in the government. Privately, he mocked gay people. He loved to bust out his like favorite gay stereotypes, about like, I just washed my hair and I can't do a thing with it, and like flick his wrist and be very swishy. And it's just like
Mr. Roper.
Yeah, like what a classy guy.
Yeah.
So, okay, before we get more into Reagan, I just want to talk, in case y'all don't know stuff about AIDS, which I hope you do. I assume most people do. But it's acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. It's a disease that it weakens your immune system or destroys it completely. And AIDS starts with the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, and that's what destroys your immune system. It's transmitted through bodily fluids. I don't want to list them all, but you know the fluids, y'all. And it's mostly spread through unprotected sex, sharing drug needles, or even through childbirth. You could get it that way too. So, and anyone who watched stand-up comedians of the 80s and 90s, they heard the same stupid jokes about AIDS and where AIDS came from. Yeah, it's like some dude with a heart on fucked a monkey. That's not what happened, you guys.
Sam
That's
Kinison.
not what happened.
He was the king of that. Yeah, he was also because he was a preacher before.
Yeah,
so that's why the Lord wanted him to shit on gay people. But yeah, he's another discussion we may go into one day.
Yes. So scientists have actually, they do their research because they're scientists, and they traced it back to like a form of HIV that was in chimpanzees and apes that was very similar to the HIV virus. That virus jumped to humans when hunters in Africa actually ate these infected chimps. He didn't fuck them.
No, but also they can scratch at you. Like
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. So like the chimps could scratch you, and then there's the blood that gets into the cuts and the wounds, and that's how it spread.
My cat, Sarah, I was grooming her too hard, and she went on my arm, and then it blew up. You can't see me, Sonia can see me, but yeah. Their saliva is nothing to fuck with, you know?
No. And that's how it spread. And so it went from this, what they were calling then, so it was like SIV, it's like simian immunodeficiency virus that turned into HIV in humans. And that's how it spreads. It starts in like the Congo, and then it went to Haiti, then it went to the Caribbean, and then it goes to New York and California within like a decade. Starts in the 70s, and then in the 80s, it's a huge thing. So, health officials become first aware in like the summer of 81. They're noticing that a lot of like young, otherwise like really healthy gay men in Los Angeles and New York were getting sick, and they were dying of these illnesses that normally are associated with people who have immune weakened systems. And without treatment, which didn't exist until 87, y'all, HIV was fatal. You might survive 8 or 10 years. So some of these men,
maybe. I mean, mostly it was a couple of years.
And some of these gay men had the virus for years, and they didn't know it. It's not their fault. Like they weren't presenting as sick. They didn't feel sick. Like, you know. But it was starting to spread, and it got this like shitty nickname where people were calling it the gay plague, and so there was like the danger of the disease, like you could die from this disease because again there was no treatment, but also like if you caught this disease then you were being outed as gay, right? Because people were like, only gay people get it. So there was like this whole other thing that was on top of it. So in the fall of 1982, the CDC describes AIDS for the first time. They know that the cases are growing. The news outlets don't really want to write about it because they don't want to talk about gay people, and they don't want to give it too much attention. Like, it's like to even talk about gay people in the media was like, oh, clutch my pearls. How disgusting. So there's a White House press briefing, October 1982, and this journalist, Lester Kinsolving, is asked the question, and the press secretary, Reagan's press secretary, is Larry Speaks. That's his name.
Larry Speaks.
What a very appropriate name. So he asked him, like, hey, like, between like 600 and 800 people have died of this disease. Does Reagan have a comment? Are you guys working on this? And he even says, like, they're referring to it as the gay plague, and the press pool just starts cracking up. It's so gross, y'all. Again, it's in the show notes. Go watch it. And like, rather than like giving a real answer, he speaks as like, well, I don't have it. And everyone's like, oh. And then he's like, do you have it? Like, maybe you have AIDS. Is that why you're asking? Because you're gay? Like, it's just so fucking childish and gross. And this happens multiple times. Again, the short film is in the show notes, and it's all the like photos from this and the audio. And it's, again, this one journalist brings it up in a few different, every time. It's like, well, maybe you have AIDS, you know, or why are you so curious about AIDS? Is it because you're gay? Like, it's just ridiculous. So January 1983, now experts are seeing that this is spreading. Now more than thousands of Americans have it at this point, and we need some sort of public health action on it. And so Reagan like immediately increases funding to the CDC and the National Institutes of Health. And of course, I'm kidding. He actually cut all their budgets. He cut a lot of money from science and social programs that had to give big fat tax breaks to wealthy people. And he claimed y'all probably know this, that the wealth would trickle down. It's going to
Yeah.
trickle down.
His economic plans is another level of creepiness we'll probably have to get
Yes.
into one day because it's so fucked up, and
Yeah.
they still
We're
cling
gonna-
to it.
Yes, he's going to give big fat tax breaks. We could do a whole other episode. He took so much money from social programs and science to give these tax breaks to the rich people with the idea that it'll trickle down to middle and lower class
They'll
people.
pay their employees better,
Yes.
who will then go spend money.
No.
Then they don't,
No.
but they don't pay them better.
No,
'Cause
they
they
don't. They
tell
keep that
them-
shit for themselves.
Right. Like our team here says that we have to make this amount. And the only way we could do that is if your salaries have to be here. And it doesn't
Yes.
matter if you've been here for 20 years and you're a great worker.
Yes.
Right.
No, the shit doesn't work.
Doesn't
it
work.
never fucking works.
No.
And they still bring it up all the time. And that's why people in the GOP, they fucking worship Reagan. And they're like, he's the best president. We're going to make America great again. We're going to go back to Reagan. So, no, none of it works. And they
No.
know they're lying. They don't care.
Or they're
So anyway,
idiots.
Yeah, they're idiots. To get funding for AIDS and sneak by like congressional opponents who are like, AIDS is only for gay people. The first federal funding for AIDS research had to be like snuck. It had to be like hidden in like a funding bill that was actually about like toxic shock syndrome and Legionnaire's disease.
Yep.
And it was like something called the Public Health Emergency Trust Fund. So they like hid some money in there. But like, so all these people, the public health experts, they're super frustrated. Like the lack of funding restricts their work. And when they're not working, they're like spending their time trying to like raise funds. And now the disease is spreading even more. And that's super fucking frustrating. So in June 83, Reagan actually held a meeting with the National Gay Task Force alongside members of his own administration and staff from the Department of Health and Human Services. So because he knows that AIDS is a thing. And this is the first time he's ever met with anyone from the then LGBT community. And it was really like a get acquainted meeting. And they discussed like the AIDS epidemic and maybe some things they could do to like help. Like, hey, maybe we encourage people to use condoms and have safe sex and things like that. But nothing came of it, and Reagan hated it. He was very dissatisfied with the meeting. So then 2 months later, he holds another meeting about the AIDS epidemic, and nobody from the LGBTQ population is there because we don't care what they think. He only invited all of his like conservative activists and like some people from Falwell's Moral Majority. There was talk about, they're like, maybe we recommend that they close gay bathhouses, and maybe we're going to require blood donors to provide sexual histories. But really what they were landing on was this idea of the position of only discussing the AIDS pandemic in the context of being gay as a moral failing and putting the blame for AIDS on the victims for being gay. It's like, how can we just that's what you get.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have been gay. That's what you get. That was
Pray
their
the gay
idea.
away. What's wrong with you?
Yes. Yeah. So after those
Assholes.
meetings, they didn't do shit for like 2 years. They didn't do anything.
And like they had are you going to talk about the quilts?
The what?
The quilts? The AIDS quilts?
Oh, I didn't even get into any of that in this, but we could talk about that.
One of my professors at San Jose State, she lost her brother to AIDS, and she and her family made a quilt, and they were sending them around the country, and it's to draw. It was an artistic display, but also it was just to open up to people like these people are gone, and these are their families, and this is like all the psychic damage,
Yeah.
like all that happens when you lose somebody
Yeah.
to a disease, and they had
No,
it
they don't,
set up
They don't care.
across the street from the White House. Mm-hmm. And it was a big political thing. And he never once went over. He or Nancy, they never once went over to look at it.
Nope.
Fuck them.
So Margaret Heckler, she was Reagan's Secretary of Health and Human Services from 83 to 85. She said she never met with Reagan in those 2 years to talk about the AIDS crisis. And that at the cabinet meetings, it was never on the agenda. Literally for 2 years, they were like, whatever. So by the end of 83, now we have like almost 5,000 reported cases and 2,000 people have died. 2,000 human beings.
Yeah. All their families, all their friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lack of help, no funding,
The stigma.
The stigma. Local leaders now are starting to stuff. That's when you start hearing the quilt, like you said. San Francisco here did a whole thing where they closed the bathhouses and like sex clubs and things like that. And then they were putting like city funding or raising money to fund like prevention, education, support services for these people, by the way, and like community-based like research projects. Like it was really like you're on your own, kid.
Like the mental health.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But community leaders know that like local response isn't going to defeat a pandemic. Like this is a pandemic now at this point. And like the federal response was non-existent. So HIV actually was first identified as the cause of AIDS by a researcher in France in 1983. And then there was a researcher in the United States in 1984. There's a really good HBO movie about it, about the scientists working to identify it. And it's called the band played on. They play it every year here in San Francisco as a fundraiser. Mm-hmm. And usually at the Castro Theater, but they're fixing up the Castro Theater right now. But anyway, it's streaming on HBO Max if you want to check it out. So it's a good one. And it's got an all-star cast. Like everyone you love is in that movie. So while all that is going on, we get the 1984 presidential election where Reagan is running against Mondale and he just kicks his fucking ass.
Yeah,
like it's like a landslide. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like,
I think he took like 48 states. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I was like, basically Mondale like won like 2 states. And I was always like, damn, that's only 2 more states than me. And I didn't even run. Like, poor Mondale.
He had Geraldine Ferraro as his VP choice.
Yeah.
And it was considered very daring because she was a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the whole time, neither of them mentioned AIDS in their campaign. No reporters asked them about it.
Right.
All these people have died. And they're like, what are you going to do? But someone was asking his dad about it. It was Ronald Reagan Jr. was asking his dad about it. Now, Ron Reagan Jr. had joined the Joffrey Ballet in New York, and he had actually participated in like their dance troupe for like beginning dancers. And he knew all these people who in the like arts and dance community. So he knew AIDS was a big fucking deal.
Right.
And like his dad should be taking it seriously. And he started talking to his mom about it. And Nancy apparently and Ron Reagan Jr. would try to talk to Reagan about it, and Reagan would like, it didn't click. Like he does a really good impression of his dad in the documentary where he's like, well, all I know is, and he like puts his hands up like, I'm pushing you back. I'm not listening anymore. And it just really, he was like, he didn't care. It didn't click. No. And then actor Rock Hudson gets it, and he gets really sick. Now, Ronald Reagan knows Rock Hudson, like Nancy knows Rock Hudson because they were both actors. And so like he actually like called Rock Hudson and like wished him well and let him know that they were like thinking about him, thoughts and prayers, but they didn't really do anything about it. And then everyone knew Rock Hudson was sick, and it wasn't like
it was
but they
visible.
didn't know it.
He was on Dynasty. Yeah. He was a special guest on Dynasty. And he was only like, I mean, nowadays, I thought he was old then. He was like 55.
Yeah, he was like, exactly.
But he was always very, very handsome. He was like 6'4" or 6'5", very rugged, very masculine, and I think very muscular. And so he was like scrawny when he did that show.
Yeah, and I think him being gay was like not a very well-kept secret. I think a lot of people knew that about him. But he got really sick, and like at first they weren't saying what he was sick with. They were saying, I think they just said it was cancer or something like that. But then 2 months before he died, Rock Hudson told his doctors, like, go ahead, tell. And they said Mr. Hudson is being evaluated and treated for complications related to acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. And that was like a big fucking deal. So like after that announcement, they raised $1.8 million in contributions, which is more than twice what they had made in all of last year, the year before. Mm-hmm. Like it was a big deal. And then like a little bit after that, like Reagan comes out and he finally, like, a reporter asks him about AIDS in a press conference and he acknowledges that it's a thing. This is September 1985. So now we're like 4 years in. Thousands of people have died. He finally acknowledges it. He calls it a top priority and defended his administration's response, said that we're responding appropriately. We're putting funding into research, which they weren't, not really. I don't know how you defend that. His administration actually, after that, they sent a request for AIDS funding, and it was put up for a vote, I guess, the same day that Rock Hudson died, which is October 2nd, and also my birthday.
I thought you were the 5th.
Second.
Okay, writing it down.
Yeah, you better write it down. No, so his administration sends a request for AIDS funding. Congress allocates $190 million for AIDS research, which, by the way, $70 million more than the administration asked for. So clearly Congress was like, yeah, AIDS is a big deal, dickhead.
Right.
And he's like, duh. Yeah, they're so, ugh. So that happens. They get some money. Reagan then is like, yeah, we're investigating it. I'm going to get my Surgeon General to make a report on it because it's a big deal. We're now in February 1986. He's like, this is one of our highest public health priorities, he said. I'm asking my Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop.
I was just going to say,
So,
it was
like,
a Coop.
Yeah, it's the Koop. To write a major report
Coop
on
with a
it.
K.
Yes. Same day, the administration submits their budget and it reduces all the federal spending on AIDS research and care programs. Same day. So the Coop writes his like 36-page report on AIDS, doesn't submit it for review to the Reagan administration because he knows that they're going to be like, they're going to rip it up. They're not going to
throw it
use
over their shoulder and
yeah,
walk
basically
away.
He's like, fuck it, ship it. So like they release it in October 86. It projects that almost 300 million Americans will die by 91 and that almost 200,000 will die of it. Like, I'm sorry, almost 300 million Americans will contract it by 1991 and almost 200,000 will die of it by then. It's very explicit. By the way, it talks a lot about fluids and intercourse and uses the word anal and all these things, and it was a huge mass mailing. It went to every house in America. It was the largest mass mailing in American history. It went out everywhere. I clearly never saw it.
No, I never saw it either. Yeah.
No. He was taking it seriously. The Reagan administration still wasn't. Here's a fabulous side note for people. So a couple weeks ago, I did a What a Creep on Phyllis Schlafly, and she described the report as it looks and reads like it was edited by the Gay Task Force. And then Coop went to the reporters and said, I'm not Surgeon General to make Phyllis Schlafly happy. I'm Surgeon General to save lives.
Damn.
Yeah. And in another interview, he said, why anybody listened to that lady is one of the great mysteries of the 80s.
Wow. Good for him.
Coop, dropping bombs.
Coop dropping a mic on that.
Yep. So in October 1986, the Washington Post, Bob Woodward of Watergate fame, was hanging around the White House writing something about Reagan, I'm sure. And he was in a meeting with Reagan and all of his national security advisors. And Reagan made some comment about Libyan leader Gaddafi's, like, I'll say eccentric clothing. Like he wore like very loud print things. And he's like, why don't we invite Gaddafi to San Francisco? He likes to dress up so much. And then the Secretary of State, George Shultz, said, why don't we just give him AIDS? And then they all laughed. Like, it was so hilarious.
Douchebags.
Such douchebags. Also in his, like, you know, in his administration is William F. Buckley, like, proposed that, like, they should tattoo HIV people, like an upper arm, maybe one for people who got AIDS from, like, drugs, or you would get a tattoo on your butt if you were gay.
Real classy there.
Class act. Also,
What an
Pat
asshole.
Buchanan, also on the list, is a communications director for Reagan. He wrote in a column once, the poor homosexuals, they have declared war upon nature, and now nature is exacting an awful retribution.
Oh, fuck these people.
AIDS was still a fucking joke. Again, like, thousands of people died. Brothers, sisters, wives, mothers, dads.
All those deaths have
all those deaths.
dozens of people attached to them. I mean, people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't make those connections.
No.
Like, yeah.
No, they don't care. So under pressure from the public, because the public's like, hey, asshole, we care. This is happening. He appoints a commission to investigate the epidemic and actually talked about it in a public address in 87. Now, by this time, almost 40,000 Americans have died and over 20,000. I'm sorry. Reverse that. Almost 40,000 Americans are infected and more than 20,000 have died. Mm-hmm. This is 87. Ron Reagan Jr., still super pissed off, started doing, he did a television commercial where he actually criticized his father's administration's response. And he said, the U.S. government isn't moving fast enough to stop the spread of AIDS. Write your congressman. And then he kind of grins and he says, or to someone higher up. Get it, Ron.
Yeah.
He also did a 30-minute privately funded AIDS education film that was on PBS. So good on you, Ron Jr.
Yeah. He seems like a good guy.
He seems like he is, for sure. And
Yeah.
so in 87, Elizabeth Taylor, she was good friends with Rock Hudson, yes?
Loved him. They were like best
Yeah.
friends. And
Yeah. And she was an
she had a lot of
early
gay friends. She was,
Yeah.
and from like a young age, like she was a movie star when she was like 14, and then when she was
Yeah.
like the ripe old age of 15 and 16, she was getting adult parts. Like they paired her up
Yeah.
with men older, so she had her close friends in Hollywood. A lot of them tend to be gay men because she felt
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's in the also on HBO. There's a
Elizabeth Taylor
documentary about
documentary.
Elizabeth Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she talks about that, and she was good friends with Rock Hudson and like Roddy McDowell
Mm-hmm.
and Montgomery Clift. And so she was an early like advocate,
An ally and
Very-
an advocate.
yeah.
Yeah.
very outspoken for like AIDS research. So she asked Reagan to speak at a fundraising event for the American Foundation for AIDS Research, which is like one of the like leading organizations, and she's like their national chairperson. And Nancy really wants him to do it because Nancy like still super cares about Hollywood people liking her.
Right. Yeah,
And-
they hate her at this point.
Yeah, because they're fucking letting them down. This virus had a huge impact on like the entertainment community
A
and
whole
like
generation of choreographers, actors, writers, producers. Yes, behind the scenes.
yeah.
Whole generation.
I've heard stories from people who still live here in San Francisco about what it was like in the 80s here in SF. And they were just like, it was devastating.
Yeah.
Devastating. They said that like just entire, like just so many people died. Like, I can't even fucking imagine. It makes me so sad. So Elizabeth Taylor asks him to do this. Nancy wants him to do it. Reagan doesn't want to do it, but she usually gets her way. with
No, he
Reagan.
listened to her.
Yeah. And she didn't trust his speechwriters. She wasn't a big fan of his like second term crew that he had around him. And so she brings back one of his past speechwriters to help. And it's this man named Landon Parvin. And he steps in and he's like, well, let's work on this speech. Let's get the Surgeon General and Reagan in a room together, because then maybe he could put some helpful information in there. And he learns that like the coup and Reagan had actually never met and talked about AIDS before.
Oh my God.
And now we're in 87 still. So like Parvin and Coop show up for the meeting, and Reagan invited a bunch of his conservative cronies to the thing. And Coop was like, he stood his ground, man. He wanted to like really crack down on like all these unwarranted, like stigmatizing fears, and like really set the record straight and be like, hey, you're not going to get AIDS from swimming pools or telephones or mosquitoes or food prepared by someone infected with HIV. And people were like, the jury's still out, like on that. It's like, it really isn't, but okay. And then Parvin told Reagan, look, this is the way Nancy wants it. So he was like, I'm going to do what she says. I got to do what mommy says.
Mommy.
Yeah. So weird.
Ugh.
So 3 days before the speech, Parvin like submits his draft to the White House officials, and needless to say, they didn't really love it.
Ugh.
And this one guy, Robert Sweet, who doesn't sound very sweet, he was like a senior member of like Domestic Policy Council. He returned his copy of the speech and he wrote a note. He like crossed out things, and then he wrote in the margins, homosexuals and drug users choose their lifestyle. It's the innocent children, hemophiliacs, and unsuspecting spouses who are victims. Ugh. So Reagan didn't
Worthy
make
and
those
unworthy victims. Yes.
Yeah, yes. But Reagan didn't make those changes, but his speech was still like tone deaf AF. And you can like, it's in the show notes. I've got like a video in there of like the speech is like repeatedly interrupted by people like booing and hissing. And like, he's like, you know, AIDS is going to be added to the list of contagious diseases, which mean like in that people from other countries couldn't come into America if they had AIDS, and people were like, boo. And then he's going to call for routine testing of like prisoners and immigrants and anyone who applies for marriage license. People are like, boo. And then he talked about hemophiliacs and like the spouses of IV drug users and blood transfusion recipients and babies who were born with it. And nowhere in the speech does he even use the word gay or homosexual. Like,
wow.
The speech is a total fucking bomb. Like, everyone hates them after this. Where there's like a little bit of a turning point because they fucking hate negative press. Especially Nancy. She hates it. And Nancy hates it. That means Reagan hates it. So like after that, Nancy becomes the like honorary chairperson of like the United Nations for children affected by AIDS. Like this is her way of trying to like rehabilitate their image. And like Reagan actually signed like an executive order that created this like commission on the HIV epidemic. It was supposed to investigate and recommend measures that the federal, state, and local governments should use to respond to the crisis. By the way, again, we're looking like fucking 10 years too late, but whatever. The commission is filled with like a bunch of his conservative cronies who aren't no basis in like scientific thinking or, you know, a lot of moral judgment.
Right.
Apparently Nancy is the one who called it out that they at least need a gay person on there. So they put a gay person on there.
Find us a gay.
Yeah.
Okay, just sit there and don't say anything.
Pretty much. So the report comes out. It's like in 1988. It says that there was like a distinct lack of leadership from the federal government. Surprise. And it lists like 579 recommendations of things the government could do to like help. And it's like things like, you know, opposition to laws that prevent discrimination or increase funding to $3 billion a year to like fight it. And more education about the disease, starting in elementary school and like all this stuff, He didn't do much with that. He did like a few things. Like one was like notifications to those at risk of infection and barring federal discrimination against civilian employees with AIDS, like in the government. And that was pretty much it. The rest of the report, he was just like, yoink, just like threw it behind his shoulder, just sat on a shelf and gathered dust. He didn't do shit. Mm-mm. And after that, like Reagan like pieced out. He's like, bye. And like we get George H. Bush, I'm sorry, George H.W. Bush, not gonna do it.
Wouldn't
not
be
gonna,
prudent.
1,000 points of light. And he was no better. Like when Bush was president, 70,000 people died from HIV. Following the footsteps of Reagan, he didn't make a statement on AIDS till after a year of taking office. And even then, it was like, come on now, let's all be nice. Let's have some compassion for people with AIDS, and promised to like outlaw discrimination. But he didn't do anything in the way of funding, really. And he really thought it was like, it's your fault. Behavior modification is what y'all needed, and less on the like medical research. So according to The Atlantic, almost 83,000 people died. I'm sorry. I keep reversing these numbers. Almost 83,000 cases of AIDS were confirmed while Reagan was president, and nearly 50,000 people died of the disease when Reagan was president.
Wow.
So that's the end of like Reagan's shit, but there are some good news things, and I don't know if we want to get into that because I feel like I've talked for a really long time, but do you want me to hit some of these bullet points?
Yeah, please. Let's do it.
Okay. So 91 is when they announce the like red ribbon becomes the international symbol. Same year, Magic Johnson comes out and announces he has HIV, and big fucking deal.
Huge news.
Like, first of all, he was a basketball player that everybody looked up to. Like, he's not gay. Like, I don't remember how he got it, to be honest. But, like, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, it was a big deal. And I remember when he made that announcement, and, like, men I worked with at the movie theater were like, duh. Like, it finally clicked for them. AIDS is a big deal, duh. I was like, ugh. I think it was, like, right after that, Freddie Mercury announced he had AIDS, and he died like a day later or something, right? In 94, the FDA approves the first like oral like HIV test. 2 years later, it's approved for like a home testing kit. AIDS-related deaths and hospitalizations started to decline in 95, thanks to the new medications. 2001, we get like a generic drug version of that people could actually afford. So you start to see it go down even further. 2009, President Barack Obama lifts Reagan's ban that prevented HIV positive people from coming into the country. And then the FDA approved something called PrEP, which I watch RuPaul's Drag Race, and they always have commercials for PrEP in between. And it's for like HIV negative people. That was in 2012. And if it's taken daily, like it reduces your risk of HIV from sex for more than 90%. And let's see. A major study completed in 2019 showed that over 750 gay men on antiviral treatment did not transmit the virus to their partners. So that's like huge news.
That's huge.
So at the end of 2019, they say that right now there's worldwide 38 million people living with HIV and AIDS. And that also that year it was almost 1 million people died from AIDS. But that's according to the World Health Organization. So the numbers are decreasing. It's not zero,
right?
But it's better than it was.
No, and people are living longer. Magic Johnson's still with us. Yeah. I mean, it used to be like within a year, maybe 2 tops.
It was a death sentence.
Yeah. I mean, an immediate death sentence. It was not like you had time for anything, and they would just disintegrate in front of you. I mean, just it was horrifying to watch and heartbreaking.
I know multiple people who are living with HIV and they are living their best lives. They're totally fine. They're very healthy. They take great care of themselves. Like,
Right.
and you know, they'll say like, I didn't expect to live this long.
Which is a blessing.
And I was like, yeah. And also how fucking sad. Because, you know, these people are my age. They
Right.
grew up with this and they were told that it was basically a death sentence and Reagan didn't do shit about it.
No, he did not.
Fucking creep. So that's our creep.
Good
Again,
job,
Ronald Reagan.
Sonia Mansfield.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought up "And the Band Played On,"
Ooh, okay.
because our not creep this week is a controversial choice. And I will say this, he's not a perfect person, but he was a very interesting person. His name was Randy Schultz. He was born August 8th, 1951 in Davenport, Iowa. He was he went to the University of Oregon for his journalism degree, and then he moved to San Francisco. He worked for The Advocate and then the San Francisco Chronicle. He also was featured on talk shows, and he is one of the first, if not the first. He would tell you the first. He had a very big, healthy ego, by the way. He was very... And I don't say that like to put him down. I say that with envy, because I do envy people who just are like, yeah, I'm the shit. What are you going to do? He graduated high school in 1975. He had a teacher who the only time he heard the word gay before that was one teacher in high school who talked about gay people and said, you know, there's people that think that they're sinners and they're going to rot in hell or something. And then she goes, but I don't think that way, but some people do. And then he goes, that was the only thing you heard about gay people. And it was couched in this really weird way. He goes to college and he decides he goes to Portland because he heard there's like communes that were bisexual and he really wanted to get the bi part going on. He didn't admit to himself that he was gay, homosexual. He thought, but he wasn't bi. He was into dudes. But he's the first person. He works for the San Francisco Chronicle, and he's basically the first person that's like an openly gay journalist, and he's writing about gay issues. He's in San Francisco in the 1970s, and we talked about this when we talked about, Harvey Milk and the
Dan White
and Harvey Milk, and we went into pretty deep there in that episode about what. When it was illegal to be gay, and that, you know, police would storm bars all the time and just throw people in paddy wagons, and that was their crime fighting. And so it was illegal to be gay. You could get arrested for it. You could lose your job for sure. And he would write about this, and it would piss people off. He also was one of the first reporters to write about AIDS, and it's the epicenter of it there. That's one of the it's one of the most openly gay cities in the world. He starts writing about it, and he said, like, his colleagues were like, why are you want to be a gay reporter? Why do you just want to write about this stuff? Like, why don't you want to write about other things? But he was a very curious person, and he was very tenacious. He also felt that as a journalist, your job is to speak the truth. It's not to be fair or to be your job is to present.
First of all, all successful journalists, actually, let me rephrase that. Good journalists, it doesn't mean you're always successful. Good journalists are people who are curious and persistent. Like, you have to be. And there is something to being fair, but there's also, you have to call out bullshit when you see it.
Right.
You have to, part of being fair is pointing out when something's not true. It's not fair to your reader to print shit that's not true. So if you really want to be fair, like, you can get both sides, but if somebody's unequivocally lying, it's fair to be like, that's a lie.
Also, if they're arguing in bad faith.
Yes.
I mean, those are things you should absolutely put. It's like right now we're in the middle of a
I think that's
presidential
lost.
election. Yeah. And there's people that are screaming, like they're yelling to get Kamala Harris to do more press conferences. And her people are like, why? What does she gain from that? Because you'll put Donald Trump on your show and he'll say 1,000 lies. And like maybe the next day when you talk to somebody else, you might bring up that he lied about something, but you certainly never do it to his face. Or if you mention it, he just calls you stupid and then bowls all over you and they don't stick up for themselves.
No, they're fucking pussies.
They
huge
are pussies.
They should be fucking embarrassed. Like, and they'll say like, well, we're just being fair. He gets to tell his side. You're not being fair. And you're not being fair to your viewers or your readers or whatever.
When the subject is lying, you're not getting
fucking
real
chicken.
answers.
You're being a chicken.
They're chicken shit. And that's what he would have said. So he goes to San Francisco and he cannot get a job to save his life because he's openly homosexual. And you think like everything in San Francisco, like it can be conservative there like anywhere else. There's a big Catholic population there.
Yep.
There's
a very big like white Russian community in certain neighborhoods. Like San Francisco is like everyone's like, oh, it's this like, I don't know what y'all think it is. Like, you think it's Amsterdam here?
No, they think it's like The Walking Dead now. They think like
now they think it's The Walking Dead, or they think the Castro is all of San Francisco, and it's not that thing either. Like, there are different neighborhoods in San Francisco that have their own population, along with their own weather systems. By the way, so always bring layers. But like, there's. San Francisco is not all one thing.
It's not at all. He's working at the Chronicle and he becomes the gay reporter and of course then AIDS happens. So he's writing about that all the time. He's writing about AIDS before he finishes The Mayor of Castro Street, and the band Played On. He writes The Mayor of Castro Street first, which is the autobiography of Harvey Milk, and a lot of people, that's the book that I think the movie is actually based on.
Yeah, and if you could watch there's the documentary about the life and times of Harvey Milk. It is so good, like a masterpiece documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's so good.
It's so special, and and that story is incredible. And believe me, San Francisco had their. They would bust homosexuals too. So anyway, he was also in San Francisco, also in certain cities, and especially this started happening in the 70s. 70s were kind of crazy. We were getting out of the Vietnam War, but taxes are high and Jimmy Carter's president. And there's just like good things. And it's like all over the place. Yeah. So he's writing about all this, what's happening in San Francisco is like the police are not as interested in arresting gay people because there's now gay people who are on like Harvey Milk who would reach out to them and talk to them like, why are you hassling us? We're taxpayers and we make more money and we're good citizens and we look out for each other. Like we should.
And they're not bothering anybody.
And they're not bothering anybody. But there was this whole thing in the 70s, and it happened at big clubs around the world, were these sex clubs. And so it was places where people would go to get the rocks off. And they had them in SF called bathhouses. And at the bathhouses where Randy worked at one time to make some extra cash, it was bacchanalian. It was just kind of this over-the-top, hedonistic. There's some people who are really identify with their sexual side. And he said, it looks like it's skin to skin, blood to blood transmission. And people need to be practicing safe sex. But he's also saying people are not doing that. And they're going to these places. And especially a lot of men that are in the closet are going to the clubs and then going home. And then there's, so he was, his thing was, he said they need to cut down these clubs. They need to close them, because they are a health hazard. And this does not win him any friends in San Francisco. On Castro Street, he would get spit on. He was harassed. They did not like, and he said at that time he was more conservative and more libertarian. And I'm like, yeah, that tracks. When you're bringing up things, I'm like, sure. So he writes about that. And then when he wrote about the ongoing AIDS crisis, like how it began and then how people responded to it, where did it begin? One of the things he wrote about was a person who he said was basically ground zero for AIDS. And it was this flight attendant that was Quebecois. He was French Canadian.
Oh, I vaguely remember this. Okay.
Right. And he was a very attractive, Dugan, I think is his last name, but he was a very attractive flight attendant. And he would go all over the world. He would be flying all over the world. And he was very highly sexual and said he had over 200 partners a year on average. It's like, wow. Yeah. That sounds exhausting, but he had a lot of sex and he had a lot of adventures, and he was
handsome, right?
He was good looking. I remember, said he was handsome. The mustache, blonde hair, the dolphin shorts. Yeah, very handsome. But yes, he did die of AIDS eventually. He did, but he was branded with that because of Randy's writing in that book. He made it clear that's one of the persons you should blame.
He's not ground zero. That's
he's
ridiculous.
No, and it's been since then. It's been proven that he was not ground zero. But I think let me go back to about Randy. He releases the book in 87. And then it's the And the Band Plays On, Politics, People, and the AIDS Epidemic. It won the Stonewall Book Award. It wound up selling over 700,000 copies. Also, newspapers didn't review it. Also, people didn't want to read it. It was considered it was a very controversial topic. He's won multiple awards for his coverage and for his work. One thing that he didn't talk about when he was writing the book, he himself had tested for HIV, and then he would not check the results until he was done with his book because he's a journalist and he didn't want that to color his writing.
That's interesting.
So
I would think taking the test itself would color your writing, I guess. But also, I think it's okay if he did know his stance or his status while writing the book. But I think I understand where he was coming from. But I think the fact that he even thought maybe I do have HIV and I took the test would automatically color how you write the book. But it could be more like he didn't want to deal with the results while he's writing his book.
I understand that as somebody who puts off things. I don't.
Absolutely.
Judge.
He's like, I need to focus on this. I can't worry about that. So,
and if you're not having unprotected sex, or you're not engaging any behaviors, I mean, if you're keeping to yourself, it is nobody's business. And as long as you're not infecting other people, you're fine. He found out once he turned the book in that he was indeed HIV positive. He passed away on February 17th, 1994. He was 42 years old.
Damn, it's so young.
It's so young. His partner was with him when he passed away. I mean, since then, that book is considered a classic. He wrote other gay pride, gay news, gay everything. Everybody is gay.
Yeah.
He wrote about a lot of gay issues, and he was considered the expert on them. So he was always used as an expert in and I think he's a not creep because if he had lived longer and had known that there was new information, I guarantee you he would have written something or been a part of that. He had a healthy ego. He didn't mind being famous. He didn't mind that people knew him. It's also that all those qualities made people confide in him and trust him. He just radiated confidence and competency. But I think he's made absolutely a positive. He wasn't the journalist they wanted at that time because they wanted him to be more pro-gay. But his whole point was this is a health crisis. We need to treat this like a health crisis and think of everybody. He also, by the way, he was very vocal about not outing people. He thought that was basically evil. And
it is evil.
I think so,
not your business.
People would say things like, well, because there were people that were putting out policies in government that were harmful to gay people. And turns out they were gay themselves.
Yeah.
And so it was very popular to like out people to the media. But his whole point was, first of all, it's nobody's business. And then you don't know how you're going to harm that person when you do it. And it should be it should be up to them when they want to say something.
Yeah.
And he was also criticized for that.
Yeah, and there's different kinds of writers and different kinds of reporters. Like if he was approaching these as this is a health crisis and here's the facts, that's super important. And then you could have a different kind of reporter that writes it on a more emotional level that really connects with people and makes headway that way. There's room for both.
Yeah, absolutely. Since he's passed away, he's been given multiple honors. Among them, he's at the Rainbow Honor Walk in San Francisco in the Castro neighborhood. He is in the National LGBTQ Wall of Honor at Stonewall Wall, the Stonewall Inn in New York City. And he passed away in 94, but he lived an incredible life, and his work just changed the world. It just did. And
read the books or
see the movie.
Again, go to the movies. I don't know where Life and Times is playing. I could look that up real quick.
Look that up really quick because that's an important one too. But yeah, that's our not creep this week. Randy Schultz.
Great pick.
Thank you.
Harvey, come on, show me what I want. You're not going to show me what I want. Bad app.
Just watch.
Yeah, hold on. I'll just type in Harvey Milk. Maybe that'll give me what I want. The Times of Harvey Milk. It is on HBO as well.
Oh, awesome.
Or the Criterion Channel.
Love the
Sorry, I
Criterion
referred to it as the Life and Times. It's just the Times of Harvey Milk. I apologize.
Life and Time seems more appropriate.
True that.
His final book was Conduct Unbecoming Gays and Lesbians in the U.S. Military from Vietnam to the Persian Gulf. So quite
That's
a reporter, very interesting man. Those are our creep and non-creep this week. We do take suggestions, so if you got some thought in your head, all those places I mentioned at the top of the show, reach out to us, give us your ideas. We love it when you use the Annie Potts GIF. We got one from Ghostbusters, or you could just pick something of your own. Yeah. And if you like the sound of our voices, we are co-hosts of a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies. Our last episode, we covered 2000's Charlie's Angels, and we loved it. So fun. Super fun. Sonia, what are we covering next?
We've decided to wrap up our summer with a big old summer blockbuster. So we are talking about Armageddon.
Armageddon it.
If you're like, oh, is that one asteroid movie? I'm like, you might be thinking of Deep Impact, but you're probably thinking of Armageddon. You're probably thinking of the right one.
It's the one with the Aerosmith song.
Yeah, you don't want to miss a thing. We're going to be talking about Armageddon, and I'm going to get Calvin to watch it with me, and I'll be taking some notes because he'll have interesting thoughts.
And where can they find you, Sonia?
You can find
I sounded
me
like Trump there. I have dry mouth from my allergy medicine.
Margot, put your teeth back in. Okay. You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter for as long as that's there. Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky.
Threads.
What's the other? Threads. All the things. Where can people find you, my friend?
I'm at brooklynfitchick.com. I'm also at brooklynfitchick for Twitter and also for Threads and Instagram. I'm also at, please follow me on Threads. I'm trying to build that up. If that would be amazing. Yeah. And at TikTok, I'm at Brooklyn Margot. And I have some clips there for all the shows that I work on. And Brooklyn Margot for Twitter until that shit dives into the ground. I mean, it's...
Well, who knows?
Elon Musk, a past episode, and then we've had to do multiple updates because he just doesn't... He doesn't stop.
He doesn't stop every day. Every day. We could definitely do a whole part 2.
Yeah.
At some point. But anyway.
All right, everyone. In the meantime, stay safe, be kind. Just don't be a creep.
Be a creep. Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.